Today, we're going to dive deep into something that most people misunderstand. Not because they're careless, but because no one ever taught them how the human brain truly works when it comes to love, fear, and connection. If you've ever felt like you're walking on eggshells around someone who pulls away the moment things get close, or if you are that person, then this is for you. Safety, not intensity, is what rewires an avoidant brain for connection. When dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, the common instinct is to show them more love, more attention, more intensity. But what most people don't realize is that intensity often triggers the exact fear response avoidants are wired to escape from. Their nervous system is finely tuned to perceive closeness as a potential threat, often because in early developmental stages, closeness was associated with unpredictability, shame, or emotional neglect. When you bring intensity, no matter how well-intentioned, it can overwhelm their internal alarm system and push them to withdraw even more. Safety, on the other hand, speaks directly to the avoidance core need. It doesn't just soothe their fears, it reshapes their internal model of what relationships feel like. In neuroscience, safety isn't just a feeling, it's a signal to the autonomic nervous system. When the body and brain detect safety, the sympathetic nervous system quiets down and the parasympathetic system can take over. This is the state where we rest, digest, and most importantly, connect. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this state is not easily accessible in relational settings. Their brain has learned that closeness means possible abandonment, engulfment, or exposure. To make an avoidant feel safe enough to love, you must understand this deeper wiring. It's not about convincing them logically that you're trustworthy. It's about showing them repeatedly and gently through your energy, tone, and consistency that they are not under threat. This process begins with removing pressure. The avoidant brain is hypersensitive to demands for intimacy. The moment they feel like they're being cornered into emotional availability, their defenses rise. The goal isn't to dismantle these defenses, but to make them unnecessary. You do this by creating space, not emotional distance, but a non-threatening atmosphere where they can breathe, observe, and slowly step closer at their own pace. You don't chase, you don't demand, and you don't interpret their hesitation as rejection. You stay grounded, calm, and emotionally present. That consistency is what their nervous system has likely never experienced before. Safety is communicated through the subtleties, the way you listen without interrupting, the way you validate without trying to fix, the way you stay even when they push. Over time, these micro moments of trust begin to stack. The brain begins to rewire itself, not through force, but through the repeated experience of someone being present and non-threatening. Eventually, the avoidant nervous system no longer categorizes closeness as dangerous. That's when connection becomes possible, not performative, not temporary, but genuine, embodied connection that the avoidant can start to believe in. The avoidant brain was often formed in environments where autonomy was prioritized over emotional closeness. Love might have felt like a loss of control. So when someone shows up and offers love without pressure, safety without expectations, that's when the internal system begins to shift. It learns that love doesn't have to mean giving up independence. It realizes that emotional intimacy doesn't always come with a cost. That's how healing begins. This is why emotional regulation is crucial. If you respond to the avoidance distancing with anxiety, pleading, or frustration, you reinforce their fear that closeness leads to chaos. But if you remain steady, offering warmth without demand, you become a model of relational safety. Over time, that presence is what teaches the avoidant brain a new pattern. It doesn't happen overnight. The nervous system needs time, repetition, and experiences that contradict its old programming. But it's possible. And once that shift starts, the avoidant can begin to feel love not as a threat, but as a resource, something that nurtures rather than overwhelms. In short, don't try to win an avoidant over with passion, declarations, or emotional intensity. Win them over with groundedness, patience, and consistency. Show them that connection can be safe, not smothering. That's how you unlock the avoidant brain, not by storming its gates, but by becoming the one place it no longer feels the need to protect itself from. The avoidant attachment style is rooted in nervous system overwhelm, not a lack of emotion. When someone pulls away emotionally, seems distant in conversation, or avoids deep connection, it's easy to assume they just don't care. But neuroscience and attachment theory show something different. Avoidant individuals often care deeply, sometimes even more than they're comfortable admitting. But their system is wired to protect them from the very thing they crave. Their withdrawal isn't a rejection of you, it's a reaction to internal overload. Their nervous system interprets intimacy, vulnerability, and closeness as threats because somewhere along the way, their early experiences taught them that connection was unpredictable, unsafe, or conditional. In many cases, these individuals were raised in environments where their emotional needs were not consistently met. That doesn't necessarily mean they experienced outright abuse. It might have been subtle forms of neglect, emotional unavailability, or caregivers who dismissed their feelings or taught them that independence was the only way to survive. The brain adapts to survive its environment. If emotional expression was met with rejection or shame, the child learns to suppress those feelings and disconnect from their needs. The nervous system then begins to associate closeness with potential harm, so it builds defenses. These defenses solidify into what we now call avoidant attachment. This isn't a conscious decision. Avoidant individuals aren't choosing to shut down or be cold. Their body is responding to perceived threat, even if their mind says it wants connection. It's a neurobiological reflex. Just like how a person pulls their hand away from a hot stove without thinking, avoidants retreat from intimacy without necessarily wanting to. When emotions begin to rise, especially in relationships, their heart rate may increase, their muscles may tense, and their mind might look for exits. They often don't know why it's happening. All they know is that they feel overwhelmed and unsafe. And instead of seeking comfort like someone with secure or anxious attachment might do, they retreat inward. That's how they protect themselves from being vulnerable in ways that once felt dangerous. Understanding this is critical if you're trying to build a relationship with someone who has avoidant tendencies. It reframes the narrative. Instead of taking their distance personally, you can begin to see it for what it really is, a protective reflex. And once you see it that way, your own reactions can become more compassionate and less reactive. Avoidants aren't emotionally dead. They are emotionally flooded. And the more they care, the more threatened they often feel. That's why, ironically, the closer you get, the more they might push away. It's not that they don't want love. It's that their nervous system is screaming that love is dangerous. That's also why arguing, pursuing, or pressuring them usually backfires. Those behaviors escalate their internal stress and reinforce their belief that closeness equals chaos. Instead, what they need is the opposite space, predictability, and emotional regulation. You don't have to stop expressing your feelings, but you do need to do it in a way that their system can tolerate. When you speak calmly, stay grounded, and give them time to process, you reduce the overwhelm and allow their nervous system to stay regulated in the presence of intimacy. Over time, this starts to change their internal map of what relationships feel like. It's also important to realize that many avoidants are not emotionally illiterate. They often think deeply about their relationships and long for closeness. But their mind and body are in conflict. Their emotional brain wants connection while their survival brain pulls away. This internal battle can be exhausting. And the more pressure they feel, the more their protective patterns take over. So your job isn't to rescue them or force them to open up. Your job is to become the calm in the storm, to model a relationship that doesn't overwhelm them, to offer consistency, not intensity, presence, not pressure. As they begin to experience this kind of relational safety, something profound can happen. Their nervous system starts to recalibrate. The parts of the brain associated with threat detection, the amygdala and limbic system, become less reactive in relational contexts. New neural pathways begin to form. They begin to associate connection with calm instead of fear. This process is slow and fragile at first, but with patience and repetition, it can solidify into a new baseline. They start to show up differently. They stay in the conversation longer. They share more, even if it's subtle, and most importantly, they begin to trust not just you, but themselves in the context of connection. Avoidant attachment isn't a life sentence. It's an adaptive response to early emotional experiences. And because the brain is plastic, it can change. But change doesn't happen through force. It happens through safety. And safety starts with understanding. When you see the avoidant not as someone who lacks feeling, but as someone who is flooded by it, you can meet them where they are. You can regulate your own reactions, lower the emotional volume, and become the kind of partner who gives their nervous system something it's never had before, a reason to stay calm in the presence of love. Emotional attunement and predictability reduce relational threat signals in avoidance. At the core of the avoidant attachment system is a finely tuned sensitivity to threat. Threat not in the physical sense, but emotional. The avoidant nervous system doesn't process intimacy the way a securely attached person might. Where others may see connection and warmth, avoidants may feel tension, apprehension, or even fear. This is not because they dislike closeness, but because they associate it with unpredictable emotional outcomes. The brain learns patterns based on past experience. If love was inconsistent, if vulnerability led to shame or abandonment, then the brain and body learn that emotional closeness is risky. So when someone gets too close, their internal alarm bells go off. This is why emotional attunement and predictability are so essential in creating a safe environment for connection. Emotional attunement means tuning in, being present, and responding in a way that shows you understand and respect their emotional state. Even when they are not outwardly expressive, avoidant individuals often struggle to communicate their needs directly. They may downplay their emotions or appear indifferent, but beneath that surface, their nervous system is tracking every facial expression, tone of voice, and gesture, searching for signs of danger or rejection. When they sense emotional intensity or inconsistency, it reinforces their belief that closeness is not safe. Attunement helps counter this. It says, I see you. I hear you. I'm not trying to change you or control you. That level of nonverbal safety can do more than words ever could. Predictability complements attunement by giving the avoidant brain something it rarely had: growing up reliability. If every interaction feels like a guessing game, if your moods fluctuate, if you say one thing but act another, it activates their threat detection system. Their nervous system will prepare for withdrawal. But when you show up consistently, calm today, calm tomorrow, when your words match your behavior, when your reactions are measured and not overwhelming, you begin to disarm their defenses. Their system slowly starts to trust, not because you've said the right things, but because you've done the right things again and again in small, non-threatening ways. Avoidants aren't asking for perfection. They're asking for emotional safety, even if they can't articulate it. That safety isn't built through emotional fireworks. It's built through subtle signals that say, I'm here. I'm not going to overwhelm you, and I'm not going to abandon you. When you understand that an avoidant person has likely been trained by life to expect rejection or engulfment, your entire approach shifts. Instead of demanding connection, you offer presence. Instead of reacting to their silence with frustration, you respond with steadiness. And that response doesn't go unnoticed. Even if they don't express gratitude, even if they don't open up right away, their nervous system begins to register a new pattern. They begin to relax in your presence. And relaxation is the gateway to connection. It's also important to remember that emotional attunement isn't about fixing the avoidant or coaxing them into closeness. It's about understanding where they're coming from and adjusting your energy accordingly. This doesn't mean abandoning your own needs. It means communicating those needs in a way that respects their rhythm. When you say, I'd love to talk, but only if you feel ready, you're offering choice without pressure. That tone matters. You're signaling to their brain, you are safe here and you're in control of how close we get. That signal begins to rewrite old associations. It helps the avoidant brain recognize that connection doesn't mean losing autonomy. It can coexist with freedom and choice. Predictability also involves emotional regulation on your part. If your responses are unpredictable, if one moment you're calm and the next you're reactive, you confirm their fears. But if you remain emotionally steady, even in difficult conversations, you model a new kind of relationship experience. Your stability becomes an anchor. And in time, they may begin to move closer, not because they've been convinced to, but because their nervous system feels safe enough to try. The avoidant brain is scanning for cues every second. So every time you respond instead of react, every time you stay consistent instead of chaotic, you send a message to their body. Love can be safe, connection can be steady, and intimacy doesn't have to hurt. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be attuned. You need to understand their silence as self-protection, not disinterest. You need to learn that small acts, like giving space without pulling away emotionally or being present without demanding disclosure, can be deeply healing. Avoidants are not unreachable. They are overwhelmed. And your predictability and attunement help lower that overwhelm. This doesn't happen instantly. The avoidant nervous system takes time to adjust to safety. But it will adjust if the conditions remain supportive. With each safe interaction, the internal wiring begins to shift. They may start to share more, reach out more, and even begin to rely on you, not in a dependent way, but in a grounded, trusting way. In the end, the most powerful thing you can offer someone with avoidant attachment is a nervous system that stays calm in the face of theirs. You don't chase them. You don't abandon them. You stay gently, consistently, predictably. And in that presence, the threat signals begin to fade. That's how love becomes possible. That's how intimacy becomes safe. And that's how the avoidant brain learns to stop running and start connecting. You build closeness with avoidance not by chasing them, but by being consistently calm, present, and non-intrusive. The natural urge when someone seems emotionally distant is to do more, talk more, ask more, love more, reach more. But this instinct, while well-meaning, can often make avoidant individuals retreat further. Their nervous system is primed to interpret closeness as a loss of control or personal space. When they feel someone rushing in emotionally, their brain reacts with alarm, not because they dislike the person or because they don't have feelings, but because their attachment system is wired to view emotional intensity as a threat. So instead of closeness being comforting, it becomes a trigger. The more you chase, the more they run. The more pressure they feel, the more they shut down. The cycle deepens, and both people end up feeling frustrated, misunderstood, and emotionally distant. What actually creates closeness for an avoidant is not effort in the traditional sense, but safety. Emotional safety that comes through calm consistency. This means showing up in a way that doesn't demand immediate intimacy or responses. It means allowing space for them to feel, observe, and move closer at their own pace without being pulled. The avoidant attachment style was often formed in environments where emotional needs were not respected or were too overwhelming to handle. As a result, avoidant individuals learn to rely on themselves, to suppress vulnerability, and to associate closeness with discomfort or emotional suffocation. For them, control equals safety. When someone invades that sense of control, even with good intentions, it activates their defense system. Being calm is not just about lowering your voice or avoiding arguments. It's about emotional regulation. Avoidants are sensitive to emotional instability in others. If they sense volatility, urgency, or reactivity, they instinctively protect themselves. When you remain calm in emotionally charged moments, you're not just keeping the peace. You're signaling to their nervous system that this interaction is not dangerous. This creates the conditions for connection. A calm presence is like oxygen to someone who fears being emotionally overwhelmed. It makes you feel less like a source of pressure and more like a safe place they can return to. Being present is the next critical ingredient. Presence doesn't mean hovering or constantly engaging them in conversation. It means being emotionally available without being intrusive. It's the kind of presence where they know you're there, but they don't feel pushed. You listen without interrupting. You accept silence without trying to fill it. You allow them to share at their own pace without pushing for deeper disclosure. Avoidants need time to process their emotions privately before they feel safe enough to express them. Your non-demanding presence tells them, I respect your space, and I'll be here when you're ready. That message, even if unspoken, is powerful. It bypasses their defenses and begins to replace fear with trust. Non-intrusiveness is especially important. Many people confuse love with intensity. They think if they're not expressing their feelings openly and constantly, it means they're not doing enough. But for an avoidant person, too much emotional intensity can feel like chaos. Instead of feeling loved, they feel smothered. Instead of feeling safe, they feel exposed. This doesn't mean you have to mute your feelings. It means you express them in a way that doesn't demand reciprocity or put pressure on the other person to match your emotional speed. For example, saying, I enjoy spending time with you, without expecting them to say it back, immediately can go a long way. It shows emotional honesty without making them feel trapped. Avoidants often test the emotional environment around them before they fully engage. They observe how you react to their distance. If you panic, chase, or get angry, it confirms their belief that closeness always leads to emotional chaos. But if you stay grounded and continue showing up with calm, patience, and presence, they start to feel something unfamiliar. Safety. That safety is what slowly erodes their protective walls. Over time, they may begin to respond in small but meaningful ways. They might initiate contact, open up about something personal, or simply stay a little longer in your emotional space. These are signs of progress, even if they seem subtle. Each moment of closeness that isn't followed by pressure teaches their brain a new association, connection, can exist without control, and love doesn't have to feel like a trap. This process isn't fast, and it isn't linear. Avoidants may still withdraw at times, especially when emotional intensity increases. But if you continue to approach them with calm, consistent, non-intrusive energy, they'll begin to rely on that emotional stability. Eventually, their nervous system recalibrates. Their internal alarm bells don't ring as loudly when someone gets close. Their threshold for emotional intimacy expands, and they begin to open up, not because they were forced, but because they feel safe enough to do so. They begin to move toward you voluntarily, and that is when true closeness begins. Chasing an avoidant keeps them stuck in survival mode, but being calm, present, and non-intrusive invites them into connection without triggering their defenses. It gives them the room to meet you halfway in their own time. This approach doesn't just build relationships. It heals nervous systems. And in that healing, love stops feeling like a danger and starts feeling like a refuge.